In today's podcast, you'll learn useful linking expressions and connectors for the Cambridge B2 First and C1 Advanced Writing exam, so that you're not constantly repeating words like and, but, and also. Consequently, you'll improve your vocabulary in this episode of
Aprender Inglés with Reza and Craig.
Hello and welcome, especially if you're a new listener to the podcast. My name's Craig.
And my name's Reza.
And together with more than 50 years of teaching English between us, Reza and I are going to help you improve your English and take it to the next level. How are you, mate?
I'm not bad. I wasn't great for a couple of weeks, actually. I don't think I've told the listeners before, but I had an operation on my nose. Nothing very serious, but I had to get this.
Was it cosmetic to make it smaller or more attractive?
It wasn't. I'm afraid I'm happy enough with continuing to be as ugly as I am. I've got used to it. That doesn't bother me. So it wasn't plastic surgery. No, it was to make me breathe better, because apparently at night when I sleep, I don't breathe very well, according to the doctor. Well, I didn't breathe very well. But now that I've done this operation, septoplasty, hopefully that will make me breathe better. The only disadvantage of the operation is for a few weeks after it, you actually breathe a little bit worse until you get better. So if my voice is a little bit strange from time to time in this episode, I apologize. But I'm sure you can understand me. So be patient if I sound even worse than ever.
Well, I'm really pleased that you got over the operation well and that everything turned out okay, because breathing is a thing that's not to be sniffed at.
Oh, very good. Very good.
Okay, first this week we have a voice message from Ignacio from Jaén in Spain.
Hi, Greg and Reza. It's a pleasure for me to tell you something about myself. My name is Ignacio. I'm from Spain, from a little town in the south of Spain called Jaén. And it's a pleasure for me to say thank you very much for all the effort that you have done for us. It's unbelievable. It's extremely incredible how I appreciate your effort, because I am starting to know the importance of speaking and the English language. It's a fantastic gift from me. I just wanted to say that both of you, are very important in my life. I spend a lot of time listening to you every day, and I realize that I have a reward with both of you. I didn't prepare at all this speaking. I just speaking, like this from the bottom of my heart, and just to say again, thank you very much for all the effort that you have done for us. And I will speak soon to you again, because I love it. Bye bye, and have a nice day.
Thank you very, very much, Ignacio, for such kind words. We really do appreciate feedback such as yours, because it makes everything worthwhile. And you and everybody who listens are important in our lives too. So thank you so much for what you said. And it was an excellent message, wasn't it, Reza?
It was, and your pronunciation is very good. And thanks very much for your kind words. And you've just reminded me, Ignacio, that Jaén, where you come from, is a place that I'd really like to visit. You said that the podcast is important in your life. We're very happy to hear that. I often think Jaén is important in my life because I love olive oil. And I know that Jaén is like the center in Spain and therefore in Europe, you could say, of olive oil. So I'm a big fan of your product from Jaén, the olive oil. Thank you very much. Jaén plays an important part in my life.
Yeah, me too. I love olive oil. And before I came to Spain, I never had olive oil before because in the UK, we put butter on everything and bread and sandwiches. And here in Spain, it's olive oil on toast. And I absolutely love it.
Can I just comment on one little mistake that you made? And made is the operative word. Your message was fantastic, but you said thank you for the effort you have, and you said the word done. The effort you've done. But no, that's not right. It's to make an effort. It's very difficult, isn't it? Make and do cause a lot of problems, don't they? Because in Spanish, it's the same thing, hacer. So you just have to know, I guess. You got to learn. So it's to make an effort, Ignacio. But thanks very much for your message.
Although it will be do work. So you could have said thank you for the work you do, or thank you for the work you have done. So those collocations, do work and make an effort. At the end of your message, Ignacio, you said I'm speaking from the bottom of my heart, which is a very emotional way to say that you're putting your emotion into your message. But you were also speaking off the cuff. Off the cuff. Cuff is C-U-F-F. The cuff is the end of the arm of your shirt. So if you're speaking off the cuff, you're speaking unprepared. You're not using notes or bullet points. You're just speaking spontaneously, off the cuff. And speaking of speaking, if you want to improve your speaking, why not join one of my English conversation groups? The focus of my conversation courses is on fluency, interaction, and improving your confidence when you speak English. So if you would like to take your speaking to the next level and you want to know more, send me an email to Craig, C-R-A-I-G, at inglespodcast.com, and I will send you more information. And Reza, you also help students when you have time by giving them private lessons, correct?
I do. I can offer help one-to-one, just me and you. But I haven't been doing much in the last few weeks because, as I said, I had that operation and I was unable to teach. So if you're a person who's written me an email and I haven't replied to you in a few weeks, I'm sorry, but I was off. I haven't forgotten about you and I will get back to you. So as soon as I have time and I can answer everybody, I'll be offering one-to-one classes again. The great advantage is that we can do whatever you want. We could prepare you for an exam if that's what you've got to do. We could concentrate on speaking. We could concentrate on grammar. We could do both. We could do listening, specialist vocabulary, whatever you want. If you're interested, send me an email to belfastreza@gmail.com. But please be prepared to wait for a few days until I answer everybody. I've got a list of people to answer.
Next, we have a voice message from Adrian from Barcelona.
Hi Reza, hi Craig, I hope you're doing well. First of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Adrian and I'm from Barcelona. Every morning I listen to your podcast on the train, and that's because I have recently restarted my English studies after a while. I'm currently preparing for the C1 Cambridge exam. It was a month ago while I was searching for a podcast to improve my listening skills when I came across yours. I wish I had found it before. Regarding the CAE Cambridge exam, I wondered whether you could talk about some nice connectors to include in my essays. You know, those outstanding connectors which should astonish the examiner who is going to correct the writing. In fact, not only would I like to replace the typical connectors, but also to learn new ones. In other words, which connectors could I use instead of the typical ones such as however, nevertheless, furthermore, and so on. I want to take my essays to the next level, as you say. Actually, I found out some connectors that I really liked, such as notwithstanding or even by the same token. I'm not sure whether the last one is too informal to be included in an essay though. If you ask me, I would say that covering all types of advanced essay connectors could be a super interesting episode, as well as comparing them to their equivalents for the B2 first, so as to help FCE candidates in their preparation. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you for your podcast. Seldom have I missed an episode recently. Take care.
Adrian, thanks very much for your message, which was really clear, and your English was fantastic.
Wonderful.
It's very good. Certainly speaking, it sounds like you have a very good C1 level. We're not sure about your writing, but I imagine that's good as well. Craig, did you notice anything about the language that Adrian used?
Well, he used some lovely vocabulary and very advanced grammar. I wish I had found it before, and very good connectors, outstanding connectors that will astonish the examiners, I think you said, Adrian, and some lovely inversions at the end. Seldom have I missed an episode recently. Very advanced grammar.
Yeah, and another one, I think, not only would I do something, but also 2 inversions. I just wanted to talk about that, though, Adrian. That's very good to use an inversion or 2, maybe, in a piece of writing, but I wouldn't use any more. It's like everything in life. Too much of a good thing is not so good. If you overuse anything, any vocabulary, any pattern, any connector as well, right? And then the examiner won't like that. So, notwithstanding was your example of an interesting connector, great. But I would only use it once in one piece of writing.
Yeah.
If you use it any more than once, then it doesn't sound good because a native speaker wouldn't do that. So be careful with these interesting pieces of vocabulary and grammar, like inversions. Only use them sparingly, occasionally.
Yeah, it's a bit like idioms, isn't it? You know students who love idioms, and they'll say something like, I left my house, it was raining cats and dogs, and I don't want to beat about the bush, and they use 3 or 4 idioms in the same sentence, and it just sounds ridiculous. So use them sparingly, use them occasionally, and then they can be very, very effective. So I don't know if this is going to be a super interesting episode, as you suggested, Adrian, but we do have some linkers for you that we're going to compare C1 level with B2 level. And people studying for the exam and preparing their writing will find it very interesting. So let's get on with it. Before we go into specific linking words and connectors, we want to remind you that we have spoken about these before, although not with so much detail. You can go and listen to the episode called Linking Expressions. And to find that, go to inglespodcast.com/55, episode 55, and also more linking expressions, which is episode 179. So inglespodcast.com/179. And
everybody should be aware that this isn't an exhaustive list. Exhaustive means absolutely everything is on it. No, because that's impossible. You could never have an exhaustive list because there are infinite possibilities. There are many connectors and linking expressions that you could use in English. Don't try to use every single one you know in one piece of writing, because apart from connectors, you've got to have other context in the language as well, not only connectors. So as long as you use interesting ones from time to time, that's good enough.
Yes, and we remind you, as Adrian said, this list is focused more on written English than spoken English. So bear that in mind, consider that. And to see the lists and our example sentences, go to the show notes for this episode, where you'll find a table with all of these linkers listed, and you'll find that on the website inglespodcast.com/519.
So, as Craig said, we have done episodes about linking expressions before, but we really like Adrian's idea of comparing typical B2 first level connectors with slightly more sophisticated C1 advanced connectors. So many of you probably are people who have done a B2 exam and you've used connectors successfully. However, to impress the examiner at a C1 level, it's maybe not good enough just to be using words like also or and or but. You have to impress him or her with slightly more sophisticated linkers from time to time.
Exactly. linkers have different functions, different uses. So to clarify, we've divided our linkers into different uses. And just to list them quickly, we have linkers of addition, cause and effect, contrast, emphasis, giving examples, generalization, inference, introduction, order, purpose, recap, similarity, solution, to support a point, time, unexpected result, and finally, of course, conclusion. So, Reza, let's go with the first category today, addition.
Yes, a very important category, because certainly you're going to have more than one point, more than one idea in any piece of writing you've got. So let's start with a very important word, and you can use it, although it's very basic. The word and is obviously an extremely useful word to connect two things together. Don't be afraid to use it. You have to use it. You couldn't really do a piece of writing in English without using the word and. I can't imagine it. It would be impossible. Just because it's basic doesn't mean, oh no, I can't use it. I've got to use something more sophisticated. No, that's not true. So some more, perhaps more basic words like and include also. Maybe a little bit harder, but still a typical B2 first level, in addition to, or in addition to this. And a similar word would be additionally. They're all good levels to use at B2, and you can use them at C1 as well.
Of course, it's good to mix them. Now, going up to the more advanced writing at C1, we have furthermore, what's more, moreover, on top of that, and as well as. And you'll see a couple of example sentences in the show notes. For example, at B2 level, she enjoys reading and writing. And at C1, furthermore, her passion extends to learning new languages. Of course, you can substitute furthermore for moreover.
Another very important category or function of linkers is to show cause and effect or result or consequence, if you like. A very important and very common word in English is the word so. Don't be afraid to use it, but don't use it all the time. Try to use other words such as therefore and because of this. They're all fairly typical words at a B2 level. But Craig, what if we want to be a bit more advanced?
We've got consequently, hence, H-E-N-C-E, hence, as a result, owing to, or due to, D-U-E, due to. And our examples at B2, this is true actually. I have to take my wife somewhere in the car this afternoon. Therefore, Reza and I needed to start recording early. And at C1, the project success can be attributed to teamwork. Consequently, morale is high. One comment, you need to go and look at the notes if you're studying for these exams. Also to notice the punctuation, because after consequently, we need a comma. So have a look at the notes, make sure that you are remembering those commas if these linkers begin the sentence, like furthermore, comma, for example.
Yeah, as well as looking at the show notes, it might be a good idea for this particular episode even to print out the box that we've written in the show notes, because it's going to be difficult, if not impossible, to remember all of this information. So why not print it out onto paper?
And when you're writing, you can use it as a reference. Let's move on to talk about contrast. And at B2 first level, we have but, of course. However, on the other hand, and for our Spanish listeners, remember it's on the other hand and not on the other side. On the other hand, nevertheless, despite, in spite of, which is very similar, although, and even though. What about C1 level, Reza?
You could add to that list, to be a bit more sophisticated, the words conversely, in contrast, or in contrast to this. Here's a good one. That being said, that will impress the examiner. Of course, one of Adrian's favorite expressions, notwithstanding, is a good one. What about this one, Adrian? Do you know nonetheless? The word none plus the plus this, but altogether makes a word of itself, nonetheless. So it's similar to notwithstanding. By the same token, and another word which I'm sure you all know is the word yet. But did you know that yet can be used for a contrast? That's quite advanced. People know the word yet, for example, I'm hungry, I haven't had my dinner yet. That's one meaning of yet, but I'm talking about the meaning of yet as in, I feel very tired, yet I'm going to go out for a walk. Yet can mean the same as, but that's a more advanced use of yet.
And our examples, at B2 level, I prefer coffee, but Reza likes tea. Or at C1 level, conversely, a focus on prevention can be more effective than cure.
The next category we've got is the function of emphasis, to emphasize your point. So obviously the word importantly, if you think something's important, you could say importantly, significantly, of course. And another good one at B2 level is without doubt, or sometimes we add the word a without a doubt.
And moving up to C1 level, you could write, it is worth noting that undoubtedly, crucially, unquestionably, clearly, and surely. Be careful of the pronunciation of some of those, especially crucially. It's C-I-A-L-L-Y, but it's a sh, like an S-H sound. Crucially, crucially. And examples for B2, importantly, deadlines need to be met. And at C1, it is worth noting that a healthy diet plays a vital role in well-being.
Craig, everybody knows, I'm sure, the expression for example. But have you got any more examples of giving examples?
Well, for example, you could say such as, I really like jazz music, such as Miles Davis, for example, or like, or as an example, or just the letters E.g., E.G. What about C1?
You could add to that list, for instance, which means exactly the same as for example, but just sounds a little bit more sophisticated.
That's useful if you don't want to repeat the same word.
Exactly.
For example.
Also, you could use the infinitive of the verb to illustrate. For example, in Valencia, there are many types of rice dishes. To illustrate my point, just go to a restaurant and ask them what they've got, and they'll tell you about 25 different dishes. To illustrate. Yeah, in other words, for example. Exemplified by. That's quite a good one.
That's advanced, isn't it?
It's advanced. You don't hear that so much, so that would be impressive. And another one which native speakers say a lot, but foreigners don't seem to remember or know so well, a case in point. For example, let's use the B2 level word. For example, apples and oranges are good sources of vitamin C. But to be a bit more sophisticated, what about this? To illustrate, the use of renewable energy is becoming increasingly important.
And remember that comma after to illustrate. Now, sometimes when you're writing, you need to generalize. So here are some linkers and connecting expressions for generalization. You can say generally, usually, most of the time, and in general. And moving up to C1 level, generally speaking, by and large, in most cases, or on the whole.
Here's an example of a typical kind of B2 level sentence. Generally, exercise is beneficial for health. And then a slightly more advanced linker. By and large, a positive attitude leads to success.
Our next category is inference, when you want to infer or suggest something. And at B2 level, you could say so, therefore, this means that, in other words. And at C1 level, it can be inferred that, this suggests that, implying that, or thus. Thus, thus. Can you give a couple of examples, Reza?
Let's use one with so, that very, very common word in English. We arrived late, so the movie might have started. And a more advanced C1 type example, the rising sea levels suggest that climate change is a pressing issue. By the way, the more observant listeners might have noticed, hey, they already spoke about so and therefore in another category. That's right. When we spoke about cause and effect, we mentioned the word so and therefore. In other words, some of these linkers can have more than one use. So is a very common word, as I said. It's not only for cause and effect, but it's also for inference. The same for therefore.
When you're writing, the first thing you're going to write is your introduction to your essay or article or report. And here are some linkers you can use for introducing your writing. At B2 level, you can say many people believe that. Some people think that. What about C1, Reza?
At C1 and above level, it's better if you try to make it more impersonal, more indirect, and show that you know how to use a more difficult structure by saying, it is often argued that. So instead of saying, people argue that, and active, you make it passive and impersonal with the word it. It is often argued that, or it is widely believed that, or we could simply make it impersonal using the expression there is a growing consensus that.
And for example, at B2 level, you could say many people believe that education is the key to progress. And at a slightly higher level, C1, there's a growing consensus that artificial intelligence will revolutionize our lives.
Now, after the introduction, you're going to have several points or ideas. So in the main body of your writing, you've got to put things in order. So obviously, you will think of the word first, also second. You could go on third, fourth, fifth, but it's not a good idea to count too much. Yeah, I wouldn't probably say much more than first or second. After that, I could use the word then or the word next. And for my last main idea or point, the word finally. They're all good at a B2 level. But to make them sound a bit more formal and a bit more oppressive, you can take the word first and put ly, L-Y at the end. It means the same as first, but it sounds a little bit more academic, a little bit more sophisticated. So instead of saying first, you can say firstly, instead of second, secondly, etc., thirdly, fourthly. And other more sophisticated words than next are, for example, subsequently. And for finally, we could say lastly.
First, preheat the oven. Then put the chicken in. Or at C1 level, firstly, we need to define the problem. Subsequently, we can explore solutions. Moving on to the next category, and that's the category of purpose. Why we do things. So you could just use the preposition to. Why do we take a chair to sit down? Why do we pick up a pen to write a letter, for example? In order to, so that. And what about a higher level, Reza, C1?
Well, in order to is also good at a C1 level. I think it's a good idea to purposely mix just one to and then at least one in order to. They mean the same thing. They mean exactly the same thing, but it sounds more impressive if you don't always repeat. For example, I could say to you, I went to the bank to get some money. Or I went to the bank in order to get some money. The meaning is exactly the same, but in order to perhaps is a little bit more formal. And it's just good to show an examiner correcting your writing that you know how to use it. Another more sophisticated C1 and above type expression would be with the aim of. Not with the aim to, that's a typical mistake, with the aim of. And then afterwards, if you had a verb, it would be ing. For example, we trained every day with the aim of completing the marathon successfully. And instead of just so that, a little bit more sophisticated is so as to followed by an infinitive. For example, I went to the bank so as to tell the manager about my difficult situation. So as to with an infinitive rather than so that plus a subject and verb.
And a couple of examples for you. We need to study to pass the exam. That's B2. And slightly more advanced, C1, in order to raise awareness, they organised a campaign. What's the next category, Reza?
To recap. To recap is to repeat, but maybe in a slightly different way, what you've already said. In other words, to say something like, in other words.
In other words, that is a recap expression.
Exactly. So that's probably the most well-known one. In other words, so I've said something using certain words, and I'm going to say it with different words. I say, in other words, but you can also say to sum up. So it's very typical near the end of what you're writing or speaking. It could be as well. But remember that we're focusing more on typical linking for writing. To sum up, or one which is fairly impressive for B2, put simply. What about for C1, Craig?
We could use for C1 to reiterate, or maybe we could say in other words, to put it another way, or in short. Again, all of these expressions you'll see in the show notes, inglespodcast.com/519. Give us a couple of examples, Reza.
Briefly, in other words, the plan is achievable. Or a more advanced one with to reiterate, effective communication is essential for teamwork.
Moving on to the next category, we have similarity, things that are similar. For example, at B2 level, you could write in the same way, or just like, or also, or as. And at C1 level, you could use likewise, which is one word, likewise, or similarly. Can you think of some examples, Reza?
For example, I enjoy reading in the same way you enjoy music. That's a typical kind of B2 construction, but a little bit more advanced would be likewise. A healthy diet is important for both physical and mental well-being.
Now, when you're writing an essay for B2 level or C1 level, you're very often asked to suggest solutions to problems, for example, global warming. And at B2 level, you could say one solution is, or another expression, an answer could be, blah, blah, blah. What about C1?
Yes, just to make it sound a little bit more interesting, instead of saying one solution is, you can add the word possible. That's a very typical collocation. Collocation is words that go together. So it's very typical, particularly in academic writing, to say one possible solution is. Another one could be a potential answer could be. Or one other idea to resolve this.
And a couple of examples for you at B2 level. One solution to global warming is to recycle more. And at C1, one possible solution to traffic congestion is the development of public transport.
Another important function in your writing, once you've made a point, is to support it. So obviously you can say to support this, or another possibility at the B2 level is in support of this argument. But going up to C1 level, it's a bit more advanced to say this idea is further strengthened by, or a pretty impressive one could be this one, lending credence to the idea. So here's a couple of examples at a B2 level. To support this, research shows the benefits of exercise. And then here's a more C1 or even C2 level. This is quite impressive. Lending credence to the idea, many successful firms prioritize employee well-being.
I imagine Adrien has written that one down, haven't you, Adrian? Lending credence to this idea. You like that one, don't you? Our next category, and we've got 3 more to go, is time, because very often you need to put things in a sequence of time. So you could use for B2, then, after that, before that, or next. And for C2, you could use subsequently, which means next, following this, later on, afterwards, or beforehand. And a couple of examples for you. At B2, we ate dinner, then watched a movie. One thing happened after the next. And at C1, the meeting is tomorrow. Subsequently, we'll finalize the details.
You may have to mention an unexpected result. In other words, a surprise. So you could use the word surprisingly, or curiously, or perhaps even in fact. They're all fairly basic, but a bit more advanced, we could use unexpectedly, or what about this? Oddly enough, or perhaps interestingly. Here's a couple of examples. At a B2 level, surprisingly, it rained in the desert, but more of a C1 level could be, interestingly enough, historical data can provide valuable insights for the future.
And to sum up, that's not me summing up, that's me giving you one expression you could use if you are concluding your writing. So our final category is conclusion. As I said, to sum up is good for B2 and C1 level, or you could say in conclusion, comma, or you could say overall. And for C1, maybe on the whole, WHOLE, on the whole. To conclude, in summary, all things considered, and all in all. So all in all, blah, blah, blah. And a couple of examples for B2. In conclusion, we achieved our goals. And for C1, all things considered, the project was a success.
Okay, now it's your turn to practice. Maybe you could send us a message and link it nicely with a few interesting linking expressions. If you'd like to record your voice and send it to us, you can do that through SpeakPipe. We've got a link in the show notes telling you exactly where. It's www.speakpipe.com/Ingles podcast.
And if you'd prefer to write an email and practice your linkers, you can write to me, Craig, CRAIG, at inglespodcast.com. And to reach Reza, write to Belfast Reza, that's Belfast the city, and REZA at gmail.com.
If you're a Spanish speaker and you want to study for free, why not visit the Mansión Inglés website, where there's lots of free material. Also, you can find paid ebooks and audios for self-study. Why not check out the online store? go to store, that's store, mansioningles.net.
And we won't say goodbye until we first thank our lovely Patreon supporters. And you too can join our Patreon program for as little as $1 per month. And by doing that, you get instant access to the transcriptions of this podcast and the lovely warm feeling that you are supporting the work that we do. Go to patreon.com. That's patreon.com/Ingles podcast.
We'd like to mention the name of every single one of our Patreon supporters, but unfortunately, we don't have time for that. So as usual, what we're going to do is just mention our latest sponsors who've joined this month, and they are Maria Vera, Enrique Gonzalvo, Sebastián Hernández Giner, Alberto Toledano, Josune Ali Hostes Tolosa, Javier González, and an extra special thanks to 3 people who are paying more than the minimum. They are, I'm not quite sure how to sell this, Lee MP, L-I-M-P, BMP?
Limp,
maybe?
L-I-M-P, whoever you are, thank you.
Sara and Macarena Salazar Ortiz.
Thank you so much for your continued support to everybody who is supporting us on Patreon, including our latest sponsors. In next week's episode, we're going to be describing bad food. Lots of vocabulary and collocations and ways of describing food that really is not good. So join us for that next week. Thank you for listening this week. Until next time, have a wonderful week. It's goodbye from Reza.
And it's bye-bye from Craig.
And remember, if you enjoyed this podcast and found it useful, please tell your friends so that more people can listen. The music today was by Pitts. The track is called See You Later.